Good morning. Good morning. I guess maybe it might just be afternoon where you're at. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's session. As we're letting people in, if you guys will turn on your cameras, Beth and I do like to look at you all. So again, turn on your cameras. And then as we're letting people in the Zoom room, where quite a few people are still waiting, if you'll drop in the chat where you're from, what you're grateful for. So drop in the chat where you're from, what you're grateful for. Beth, I'm going to start with you. Where are you from? What are you grateful for?
Oh, I am from Buffalo, New York. So it is afternoon for me. And
Mhm.
I am grateful for beautiful weather because if anybody's been to Buffalo, it is a rarity and we are finally getting some. And it lightens the mood. I feel like I'm alive.
Yes, I'm in Utah and it's actually terrible weather today. It's raining, all of that. So, props to you. Okay, I love this. Oh man, I'm still in PJs. That's okay. We don't
Oh,
care.
Allie, trust me, if I could be, I would be.
Allie, you want to know actually a fun fact? I have a photo shoot later today. So I've got this on and I actually have sweats on underneath. So there you go. So because I'll be changing clothes a billion times. So you're all good. All right, you guys, more in the chat. Let's blow this up. Where you're from, what you're grateful for. Maria, will you make yourself a co-host so you can let people in the Zoom room? I don't want to be monitoring this the whole time. But where you're from, where you're grateful for. And then today, let's see, we've got Texas, our amazing clients in our team, Utah Life and Proximity. Marcy, I just made a Facebook post about you like literally 2 minutes ago. Marcy just joined our team and she has 3 homes under contract already. So when I was looking at the leaderboard this morning, I was like, hell yeah. So congratulations to you. That's amazing.
That's
Um,
awesome, Marcy.
yeah, let's see. We've got Dallas, Texas, Southern Utah. Um, there's a lot of people that show that my name is attached to you on here. That's funny.
I showed
This,
up as Spring Bee when I first logged in too. It's okay.
yeah, I'm like, there is something wrong with the Zoom. I've seen a lot of springs on here. I'm like, what is going on? But I'm grateful you all get to be spring today. So, Paris, Ontario, Canada. This one says Spring Bee. I'm from Las Vegas. I'm grateful to be on this call. There's definitely a glitch on my back end system. This one, Spring Bee, is from Beaumont, Texas. If you're showing up as Spring, go change your name on here just so I can like be friends with you and see it. That's funny. We'll have to get it. My team's saying there's a glitch. It's all good. All right. Well, today you guys are in for a treat. So Beth is one of my besties. And she came and spoke at Real Estate Spring Break in March. And she was probably the number one most requested afterwards. Like everybody was like, Beth did so great. And unfortunately, to be very candid with you, I was behind the stage, like working and wasn't paying attention. But the feedback was top notch. Even my husband was like, Beth was my favorite one, Spring. And I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, hey, Beth's presentation, can she come present to my team? Can she come do a webinar? And so I asked her, we're going to kick off a weekly session moving forward, where the webinar that we're going to go in and bring in industry icons, people who are just crushing it at what they do and provide value to you. So this, we have nothing to sell you. There is no pitch at the end. It is just straight up value because this is how I have learned as well. So Beth is going to join us today all about how you can price the listing to win. Correct, Beth?
Yep.
You can work with sellers and how you can absolutely dominate the listing side of the business. I made a post about this earlier this week. There's a saying listings equal leverage, and they do, but only if they sell. So
Absolutely.
like you can't just go take a bunch of listings. So Beth, maybe before we start, I know you just told everybody you're from Buffalo, but give them a little background of who you are, and then let's dive in.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for being here, everybody. It's been a lot of fun. This is a tool that I have been using in my career for almost 20 years, and I really wish I could remember where I first discovered it so that I could give the proper credit. I am in the Buffalo, New York market. I am a former drug dealer legally. I was in the pharmaceutical sales space. If you've heard that joke before, thank you for laughing again. And I felt a calling to real estate, which has always just been kind of ingrained in me. So in 2009, I decided to leave the comfortable, stable, really nice salary and company car career to pursue real estate full time at a point that the market was really not great. And so pricing was a huge, huge conversation, but I was determined to leave my corporate America job. And then over time, I became a top producing agent in my market, became a team lead. At one point, I was an independent broker owner. I ran my own company for almost 8 years. And now I'm back to being a team lead and really pouring into the industry is my passion to share what I've learned, what's worked in my business over the years with anybody who's interested in learning. So I'm excited for this.
I love it. And what you guys might not know, or if you've heard Beth before, like she is a master with her words. So, and communication is pretty much everything in life, right? But Beth is one of the most well-spoken individuals I know. She's on point, even how she's speaking to you right now. And so, we've done the buyer mastery course together. We have done a lot of other different, you're in our inner circle, but what I'm impressed about, Beth, is like your confidence comes across when you speak to where people listen, right? And so I love that this conversation is going to be absolutely crucial right now because listing inventory, at least in my market, is picking up, right? Days on market are picking up. We have more homes coming on the market. I think we have more homes on the market right now than we've had since the pre-pandemic, and homes are sitting a little bit longer. So I think this conversation is the perfect time around having these conversations. So I'm going to turn it over to you because you are
Yeah.
going to teach them the full thing. And then what we're going to do, guys, is drop in the chat what questions you have. And then we'll come to the chat at the end. We'll do a Q&A. So Beth will present and then we'll open it up for a Q&A that you guys can ask whatever questions you might have. And then we'll go from there. Cool? Okay.
Sounds great.
Go for
Yeah,
it,
and
girl.
I do want to preface this. I know everybody's market is a little bit different, and I think that we are starting to see some shifts in various markets. I'm still very much in a seller's market. Anything that's priced reasonably is getting multiple offers. So the tool that I'm going to demonstrate for you today can also be used to have conversations with your buyers if you need to give them an education on what an appropriate offer is. So keep that in the back of your mind as I go through things. And I am going to share my screen because I do have a I'm going to request to share my screen and then we'll get going here.
Is it working or do you need me
Yes,
to?
I got it. Thank you. All
You're welcome.
right. And I have to move my floating head. All right. So, um, I talk about mastering real estate pricing, and I don't know that we can ever fully master it, but we can at least master the conversation and the information that we convey to our clients. Uh, at the end of the day, I tell everybody this: we are looking at data and we are trying to predict emotion. Like a home is worth what somebody is willing to pay for it, but there are a lot of indicators that can help you facilitate this conversation, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So to start, this is exactly how I convey information to my clients because I always joke, it's like the personal injury attorney that says past results do not guarantee future outcomes. I need them to know that while I am a professional, there's only so much that I can predict. So I say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, pricing a home is a science and an art. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at historical data. I'm looking at homes that are similar to yours that have sold in the recent past to try to make a prediction of the future in terms of how the buyers in this market are going to respond to your house. So that's like my nice way of saying, if I miss the mark, don't kill me. And then I also make sure they understand that there's a system of checks and balances in place. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, there are 5 sales that take place in a real estate transaction, and the first one is right here between us. You may or may not realize, but I don't receive any compensation for my services until I get the home successfully under contract into the closing table. So this is an investment of my time and resources, and if we're not in alignment on price, then this is a bad business decision for me. Once we come to terms, the next sale, sale number 2, is with all of the buyers in the marketplace. Our buyers have just enough information to be dangerous that they know if we're at least within a reasonable range in terms of our price, that they want to pursue the property further, whether that's request a showing, whether that's reach out to their agent. But if we are truly missing the mark from the buyer's perspective, they'll just move on. They'll continue swiping. Sale number 3 is with the buyer's representation. Once a buyer reaches out to their representation, or if their agent sees the home first, if that agent doesn't believe that we're in a realistic range in terms of price, it's very likely that they're going to advise their buyer not to pursue the property any further. Candidly, when I represent my buyers, if I see a home that's significantly overpriced, I advise them to wait because I want the seller to come to reality. My perception is that maybe the seller is not willing to negotiate. Now, assuming that we accomplish all 3 of those sales, we then have sale number 4, which is once we have the buyer under contract, the bank is going to send out a third-party, unbiased opinion, known as the appraiser, to make a determination if the if the home is worth what the purchaser is paying for it. And the reason they do this is because the home is collateral for the loan. And if, God forbid, that borrower to default on their mortgage and the bank had to foreclose, they want to know that they can sell the asset to recoup their expenses. And then sale number 5, last but not least, is when all of that information gets packaged and it gets sent to the bank's underwriting department. Now, drop a 1 in the chat if you've ever had this happen. Has anybody ever had the underwriter squash an appraisal? I have. See what's going on. All right, so it doesn't happen often, but it does happen. And ironically, for me, it happened on my personal residence. I was the seller. And while I have a very, very good relationship with my ex-husband, the sale of this home was the last piece of the puzzle for us to be able to go our separate ways. It was 7 days before the target closing date. The purchaser worked for the bank. He was relocated to the area to work for the bank, and the bank's underwriter declined his loan, saying there was too much quote unquote commercial influence in the area. Now, I live in Orchard Park, and if you've ever been to Orchard Park, New York, it is like Mayberry. So the commercial influence was there's a church and a bakery and a local real estate office. I was devastated. So I know firsthand this can happen. And so I manage the expectations of the clients that it is entirely possible. And we want to make sure we avoid that, which is why I look at the data. Now, the last thing I want to make sure that you guys understand is it doesn't matter how much you know if you can't help your client understand. I have a rule that I don't tell them anything that I could show them. And that's where the pricing analysis grid comes into play. So again, art and science, we can't change the data, but you can finesse some things and you get to be the artist and this gets to be your canvas. So here's what I use when I'm delivering a pricing conversation. Whether it's with my sellers, which is most often when I use this, or with prospective buyers to give them an indication of what's happening in the current market. All I'm doing here, and I know there's all kinds of beautiful reports that you can create. I think they're fantastic. I really am not married to or in love with any particular market assessment tool, but I will say this, I don't do CMAs. I don't do CMAs, I do professional assessment of value. It sounds different. So you're not doing a comparative market analysis, you're doing a professional assessment of value based off of historical data and using your expertise to predict the future. So whatever tool you're using in terms of how you're generating the data is absolutely fine. The point is to get the data in a manner that you're comfortable with. I do a very, very basic report from my MLS. I don't pay for anything additional. And what I'm looking at is I look at the exact same things that my local bank appraisers look at. And I do think there's a lot of commonality across all markets, but if you're not certain what the bank appraisers are looking at, get in touch with your preferred lender and ask. Because it's a really powerful conversation when you can say to your seller, I'm so confident in this pricing that if the appraiser doesn't agree with me, I'm going to go to bat for you. I have the data to back us up. So here's exactly what I do. I take all of the properties that have recently sold and I plug them in down here. You can see I have 3099, 325.9, 340, and 365. And I know for some of you in different markets, you're probably like, oh my gosh, you can still get a house for that? Yes, in Western New York, you can still get a house for that. My average sale price is probably a little different than some of yours. The next thing that I do is I indicate anything that's currently for sale. So I have 339.9, and I'm going to just make sure that you guys are paying attention. This should be 369.9. And then last but certainly not least, I have the homes that didn't sell, which are 379.9 and 399.9. So if I just sat here and started rattling off all of these numbers and talking about average price per square foot and just inundating you with paper, with grids and whatnot, like in a lot of cases, you're going to lose people unless you get your accountants or your engineers and they're just going to latch onto that and it's going to be a reason for them to not make a decision. Once I have these data points plotted out, I'm putting the general range on this bottom line here. So 300,000 up to 400,000 is generally what we're seeing in this market for this type of home. And then I literally take a highlighter. I take green and I highlight the range in which homes are selling. I take yellow and I highlight the current active listings. And then I take pink, because I haven't found a red highlighter, and I highlight anything that hasn't sold and beyond. What does this look like? Drop it in the chat.
I love this. Beth, I wanted to say something like, I just want to point out a couple pieces on here, like where you say you call a professional assessment of value, that sets you apart from the very beginning. Because I think realtors use the whole word CMA, and the consumer has no idea what that means, first of all, but it's the terminology that everybody uses. And then I also love that you said you tell them, you don't tell them something, you can show them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, this right here is showing them exactly right. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to interject, like, I feel like this is genius of how you're showing them the red, yellow, and green. Okay, continue on. I
Yeah.
just have to do
And
props.
yeah, no, it's great. And everybody here just said like, oh, it's a stoplight, it's a traffic light. You're right, guys. This is a concept that virtually everybody understands. Now, I have to share a little funny story. So when I was presenting at spring break, I'm like, guys, what does green mean? And everyone says, go. And I said, what does yellow mean? And everyone says, slow down. And I swear I heard Brian Charlesworth say, go faster. And then red is just a suggestion in his world. So unless you're Brian and you like to drive fast cars, most of us understand green is go, yellow is caution or slow down, and red is stop. So we're taking what can be perceived as something that's really complex. And, for a lot of people, even us as agents, when we start talking numbers and stats, like we start to second guess ourselves. So when Spring says, I'm confident because I have a lot of clarity on the message that I'm conveying. And it's largely because of tools like this, where I know when I put these data points down, it's virtually impossible to argue with. So now that I have this, when I get to my pricing conversation, which this is not a webinar about listing process, but I will share this because in terms of separating yourself from the competition, if you are walking in the house and you're greeting the seller with a smile, which is fantastic, and they say, hey, you want to have a look around? And you say yes and start touring the property, you're missing a huge opportunity. You're missing an opportunity to gain control of the situation, and you're missing an even better opportunity to separate yourself from your competition. So what I would encourage everybody to do is to follow this simple process. When I first walk into a seller's home and they ask me if I want to see the house, I was like, absolutely. I'm so excited to see the house. However, before we do that, could we sit down for a few minutes, preferably at the kitchen table? I'd love to just ask some questions. Where are most major decisions made? at the kitchen table. And I come in with pre-printed questions. And as I'm asking the questions, I'm taking notes. And what I say is, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, thank you so much for inviting me into your home. Well, I'm very excited to tour the property. The property is secondary to you and what you hope to achieve. So where I'd like to begin is to ask some questions so I make sure I fully understand your goals and objectives. And if I can help you achieve those, I will tell you. And if I can't, I'll tell you that too. Then I go through marketing and I tell them exactly what myself and my team do to successfully sell homes. And then I do a tour of the property. Because quite frankly, if we're having the conversation and I know going in that the range of homes that are selling are in the 3 to 350 mark, and they tell me they can't make this move happen if they don't get at least $450,000, I don't need to spend any more time there past that question. And then lastly, I come back and I have the pricing conversation. And my pricing conversation goes exactly like this. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what I'm doing is I am looking at historical data to try to anticipate the future. Buyers do show us patterns. And ultimately, the home is going to be worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. There are some systems of checks and balances in place, and I go through the 5 sales. And so what I've done is I've looked at the same data points that the bank appraiser is going to look at, and all of that information is here, and you can review it at your leisure. What I've done is I've taken the time to put this into a grid format that I think is easy for us to view, understand, and have a conversation around so that we can mutually decide an appropriate list price. And then I pull out the grid and I walk them through exactly what I walked you guys through. Down here, I've outlined everything that has sold. Next, I've outlined everything that's currently on the market. And then we have the homes that didn't sell. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, when we look at a snapshot in time of today's market, green is good, green means go, and green means money. This tells us what buyers are willing to pay for homes that are comparable to yours in this market. Yellow is a caution. It stands to reason that buyers in the market who are actively looking for homes like this, if they're looking at this home, your home, they're also going to be looking at these homes that are available. And then lastly, we have the homes that didn't sell. And you can see there's a definitive drop off around the $380,000 mark where the buyers have made the determination that homes similar to this are not worth more than $380,000. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, based off of your goals, today's market, I recommend we list at, and I take my pen and I put it right over the intersection of where the green and the yellow usually converge. Unless the house needs a lot of work. And then I put it on the lower end of my green range. But the beauty of this is it's giving you a range when you go into the home. So you don't have to do those 2-stop listing appointments where you need to see the house, go back to the professional assessment of value, and then come back with pricing. This is where I say you get to be the artist and this is your canvas. So when I'm walking through the house with a seller and I'm taking notes about what updates they've done and what things still may need to be done, I'm making mental note of where on this range I think the home is realistically going to sell. So in this case, if the house is fairly average and I know our competition is 339 and 369, and we've seen sales at 340, I'm probably going to recommend that we list between 340 and 350, for example. But it does give you leverage and it gives you the ability to convey information in a very clear and concise manner, which makes it really difficult to argue with. So my favorite is when they say, okay, but I really wanted to list it for $399 or $389. Again, I don't tell them anything that I can show them. So when that happens, which it does, I simply take my pen and I put it on that line and I say, I would love nothing more than to get you the price that you want. More money for you is more money for me, and it helps the neighborhood in the whole. However, if we list it $389.9 based off of what we know today, what's likely to happen? And I will sit there in the longest, most awkward silence forever until they say it wouldn't sell. Because it's a totally different outcome when you get them to say it won't sell versus you saying it won't sell. So I will share this. I know everybody here registered. I have paper copy of this that it's literally just in a Google Doc. I will make sure that Spring's team gets this out to all of the attendees. And then I do have this digital version in development because I have spent 15 years trying to find it existing somewhere and it doesn't exist. So I did make an investment to create it. Mostly for myself, but based off of the feedback, it is going to be available when it comes out of testing for all of you. There's a free version. You don't have to pay for anything. But I will also make sure that that gets conveyed. We'll do an announcement email when it's available for you guys.
Amazing. Beth, there's a billion questions. You want to answer them?
Okay, I would say, do we want to pause for questions here? Do I have a few more things, but I want to make sure you guys get value. So I'm okay with following your lead, Spring. You see the chat.
Let's pause for questions for 1 second. Let me just see. So is that a report from the MLS, an API, or another software? So Shane, she just answered it. It's something she's actually used a paper copy. And then she's creating an app, right, Beth? You'll
Yeah,
send
it's
out.
going to be web-based. We were going to do an app, but the functionality was a little limited. So it's going to be a website that you can go to. There is functionality that is in final testing that you'll be able to take the report from your MLS, the very, very simple basic report, and upload it. And AI will pull most of the data, but obviously humans are still smarter than robots for now. So cross-reference, you can do it manually, you can override. We're giving you guys a lot of flexibility so that this is a tool that's going to work for you.
But what you've done in the past before this has been digital, you have straight up just done it on paper, right?
Totally on paper, 100% on paper. I am handwriting in the sold data points, the for sale. I'm marking them with a pen and I'm highlighting them with a highlighter. And that I will share with you guys right away.
Right. Okay. What question do you ask the seller when you sit down? And do you not ask questions ahead of time on the phone when you're qualifying them for the appointment?
Great question. So I do have a pre-printed list, and I really start with why have you made the decision to consider a move? And then I go through various things. I ask them if they've done any homework on their own in terms of what homes are selling for, how they feel their house compares. I ask them what type of equity they're hoping to get out of the home to make their next move. I ask them their mortgage payoff. But I really ask a lot of questions around what their goals are. And then the very last question I ask, and this is a pre-close question, but make note, before we get into the marketing side, I say, what would make you feel confident listing your home with me today? Because that's when they'll tell me that they're talking to another agent or there's some type of timeline that they're restricted to. But a lot of times they're like, nothing, like as long as we feel good about you and the price, we're ready to go. Well, your whole demeanor will change for the rest of that presentation. And I don't ask a lot of questions before I go out. I really tell my clients what to, and I know I say I don't tell them anything I can show them. I give them an idea of what they should expect from the appointment. And I simply say, I'm going to pull up the tax records. I'm going to get a majority of the information I need from that. That's going to give me an opportunity to do a preliminary professional assessment of value, which will give me a range in which homes are selling. And then through our conversation when we meet next week, we'll be able to determine where on that range makes sense. And all I do is I cross-reference the tax records to make sure that they're accurate, because that's not always the case in my market. So, you know, Mr. Miss Seller, I see 2,400 square feet, 4-bed, 2.5-bath colonial in Orchard Park School District. Does all of that seem correct? Because I want to have that conversation face to face. Sometimes I feel like over the phone, it can feel like a little bit of an interrogation.
Makes sense for sure. This question comes in. What if your seller believes that they likely will be a cash buyer, so they don't care about the appraiser, what the appraiser would think because they believe there won't be an appraisal?
And we will get that, but that doesn't change the fact that the cash buyers still have access to all of this information. And
It's
likely
true.
they have representation. And so even if there's not an appraisal, if somebody has the ability to pay cash, they also very likely have somebody advocating for them.
So true. Okay, this question, what about when you live in a much smaller market and the exact direct comparables can be difficult to find? We explained sales of similar but different properties.
Yeah, and I'm experiencing that. Buffalo is not a tiny market, but it's not a huge market. We've just had a lack of inventory. So I've had to get more creative. But again, I know that the appraisers are having to get more creative. So what I would say is, modify your parameters to get enough data to have the educated conversation. Because if you're not finding the data, the appraiser's not finding the data either. And the objective is to not pinpoint the sale price today. The objective is to get a list price that makes sense, that gets people through the door.
I love that. Then last question, I'm gonna let Beth go on, and then you guys can ask more at the end. Are there ever any times that the red range overlaps the yellow or green? I imagine there are overpriced homes in every range due to the condition, etc. How does the graph help with those situations?
Yeah, great question. So the graph doesn't lie, right? The numbers don't lie and the visual doesn't lie. So it's really just facilitating that conversation. So based off of today's market, we have seen some properties that have overlapped, and it generally means that there's an exceptional buyer, somebody who's made a more emotional decision about this property, and that's actually a great segue into my next conversation around pricing. But guys, this is like a soft lob. Like I gave the perfectly lined up green, yellow, red. Your grid's not always going to look like this, but the grid will always tell a story. So for example, in my market right now, my greens are all the way on the upper end of the range. There's very few yellows because everything is selling so quickly and for over asking, and almost no reds. So my grid today is almost inversed, but that tells a story. And it tells the story that buyers are willing to go over asking price in this market due to the shortage of inventory. And so now my conversation surrounded is, we're seeing homes listed in this range. However, most of them are selling up here. And where I'm using that information is when I have my sellers that say, well, I know that Susie down the street got $40,000 over asking, so why wouldn't I just list $40,000 higher? And this helps me tell the story that the buyers coming in expect to go over asking. And so if we push this too high, they're mentally going to go, I can't walk in the door there because I'm going to have to go $40,000 over that, and that doesn't make sense. But along that line, the next conversation that I have, and we talked about this, is the 3 different strategies. And my approach to my sellers is very collaborative. If you listened in on my pricing conversations or my listing presentation, it is all about how we're going to do this together. So because we have the grid, we can now talk about 3 different pricing strategies. The first is event pricing. And event pricing is where we price the home slightly below perceived market value to create excitement and a frenzy, which generally results in getting multiple offers or getting a quick sale very close to or slightly above our asking price. The second is perceived market value, where we price right in line with what our competition is doing, knowing that we will likely find one buyer who's going to come in and make an offer slightly below our asking price. And then the third is the aspirational, or comparable to the Zillow's Make Me Move. This is where we're way off the grid, but we're willing to sit and wait for that one perfect buyer who has cash, who is making strictly emotional decisions, and chances are we're going to be waiting a long time. I won't do aspirational pricing unless it's a truly unique property, because it's just a waste of time and energy, candidly. And if you've taken listings and had them sit for a while, you know that nobody is needier than a seller whose property has been sitting on the market for a while. They start asking you to do all kinds of crazy things like, put up more directional signs at the corners and whatnot. So I personally, I won't do it. If they're super aspirational, then I tell them that I'm not the agent for them, or it's not the right time in the market. And if they decide to list with somebody else, that's fine. But what you were referring to, where the red, there may be some overlap, those were probably some aspirational buyers. They were willing to pay a premium because there was some type of unique feature in the home that was specific to their family's needs. Okay, how are we doing on time? Cool.
You're great. It's only 10:35 my time, so whatever time, 12:35 your time. Yep.
Okay, good deal. So absorption rate, I'm not going to go into this because it's a little bit more complex, but what I do with this is going back to this grid. When I say the grid always tells a story, if you are looking for a price improvement, again, it's a price improvement, not a price adjustment or a price reduction, then it's a great way to plot all of your data points a month after the home has been on the market, or 2 weeks, or whatever is customary for your market. So if you are exceeding your average days on market, it's time to sit down and do a new grid and then take it to your sellers and have a conversation. Maybe the grid hasn't changed at all, but it gives you an opportunity to revisit the conversation. So when we talk about absorption rate is essentially a snapshot in time that, based off of some data, tells us if it's a buyer's market, a seller's market, or a neutral market. This grid will do the same thing. So I do a grid for my market every month because I want to respond to the market, not react to it. And what I mean by that is if I start noticing that there's fewer solds, or there's a larger distance between the active prices and the sold prices, then I know things are starting to shift to be more of a buyer's market. If I see that there's very few for sale and there's a whole bunch of green well above the for sale line, then I know that it's a seller's market. And if I have a grid like I have right here, where everything kind of lines up perfectly, that's a fairly neutral market, where things are selling slightly below asking and there's an average number that are expiring or not selling. So again, this is a great tool. We are using this tool with our buyers because it's very challenging in this competitive market for them to understand, how high should I go without overpaying? So when we're advising our buyer clients, we're doing the grid for the subject property that they're interested in purchasing and having the conversation just in reverse. We're able to tell them, hey, most of the properties that were listed around 350 actually sold for 370. So we know that those closed, they appraised, etc. The bottom line is the visual helps take what can be a complex idea and make it something that's easy to understand and easy to have a conversation around. And it makes it very easy for you to determine if it's a property or an opportunity that you should walk away from, meaning a seller that is adamant about overpricing their listing. All right, so we talked pricing strategies, absorption. This is my own personal thing. You need to understand your market, but I think in today's day and age, we don't give our consumers enough credit. They're way more intelligent than we often will acknowledge. So going back to the driving, I think anybody here that drives a car and puts gasoline in your car, which it's not everybody anymore, but when you go to the pump and it says $2.99, $9.99, do you not understand you're paying $3 a gallon? Our consumers understand that too. When we price a house at $299, $999, that's $300,000. The other piece is, consider the way people search online. Your buyers are searching from 250 to 300, from 300 to 350, etc. If you price a home that you believe is worth $300,000 at $299,999, you're potentially missing a group of buyers that's looking from 300 to 400,000. So to increase your online search, price on the zeros. It's also something that's different. Everybody still kind of has this mentality that $299.9 sounds better, maybe. But when your sellers are talking to various agents and they're hearing everybody say the same thing, anything that helps you differentiate helps you win. All right, so some key takeaways, and then I'll answer some more questions. Remember that you're blending art and science. You can't change the science, but you get to be the artist. Use that grid to your advantage. Use visual tools. People will understand concepts like green, yellow, red a lot better than they'll understand your average price per square foot and list to sale price ratios, unless they're the accountants or the engineers. And then make sure you're adapting your strategies based off of what's happening in your market and what your sellers' needs are. All right, and then we'll open it up for any additional questions, pricing or otherwise.
Do it. Let me
Stop
read these to
sharing.
you.
Let me read these to you, Beth. Here we
All
go. Will you receive a recording of this? Yeah, we'll probably send out the replay, so you will receive the recording of it. All of these otter notes, I got to figure out how to not let them.
How do we
you
block
that?
the note takers?
Yes, exactly. All right, you guys, if you have questions, we drop it back in the chat so I can find them, because these note takers are a little excessive. Okay, Terry answered for you. So me and the seller, all the buyers in the market, the buyer's agent, when under contract, appraisers coming in, and then underwriting are the 5 people you have to convince on pricing, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, there was another one up here. Let's see.
I see. What is the square footage in the year range that you use? It depends on the subject property. So what I use in my market, what's customary is I don't put as much emphasis on the year, because I find that each area, each geography, they're all kind of developed around the same time. So unless I have like a new build compared to a 1970s home, which again, probably not going to be in the same area or price point, I don't put a lot of emphasis on the year built. What I look at in terms of square footage is I look for 300 square feet below and 300 square feet above the subject property. So for easy numbers, if it's a 2,000 square foot home, I'm looking at homes that are 1,700 square feet up to 2,300 square feet. And again, if you're not certain what your appraisers are looking at, that's a great time to lean in and ask your preferred lender. That should be an education piece.
Because it's totally different in Utah. In Utah, we go 1,000 square feet in each direction, right? Because the housing, like we have basements and whatnot. So
right. And you can count your square footage in basements. We can't. So that's why I say really understand your market and tap into your local lender. Janet, I saw that you would like a list of the questions. I'm happy to share those.
I love that. And how many sold, active, and expireds are you using to make the grid?
Oh, in my perfect world, I want 4 of each. My world hasn't been perfect for a long time. So that's why I say we adapt the strategies as we need to. You know, we respond to the market. So I've had to go back 2+ years sometimes to find enough data points to get me something that hasn't sold. But it's still relevant because our market hasn't changed that dramatically in 2 years.
That's so crazy. It's so crazy, the lack of.
I know.
Yeah. Aren't you guys, any other questions that you have for Beth? Because we're not going to keep you longer than needed. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat. Beth, how do they find you?
I am on Instagram as Beth by a Billion. That's probably the easiest way to find me. I will make an announcement there as well when the digital tool is available, and I will share with Spring's team the paper copy as well as the list of questions that I ask, and you are free to use them, modify them, whatever is going to help you succeed.
Yes. So if this was a value, guys, go follow Beth on Instagram. She's beautiful. She's fun. She's got great value. She's speaking all over, doing webinars. People are watching this and being like, hey, will you come present? You just literally presented, I think, in North Carolina, or was it?
Yeah, I was just down in Raleigh. I saw somebody here is in Raleigh. So sorry I missed you. But yeah, my parents are in that neck of the woods. So that was an easy one to say yes to.
I love that. Yeah. So, as always, Beth, we love you. We appreciate you. You guys go follow her. If you guys, I will send out this recording if you registered. And then every week we're going to do some type of webinar. The next speaker is actually going to be Brandon Brittingham. So Brandon was also at Real Estate Spring Break and he spoke on wealth. But the thing that's been requested the most, he freaking mic dropped it. Drop in the chat if you were there or if you've heard Brandon speak. Like he was phenomenal. And so he's actually, we're going to do a webinar on how to present. Not necessarily even just presenting in person, yes, but also on Zoom for engagement, speaking styles, skills, because we can all be better communicators. So the next one up is Brandon Brittingham and then William Lamb. Many of you guys have seen me do stuff with William Lamb. William is going to show you how you can start the foundation of really creating and designing and getting past like your threshold of where you're at and how make massive movements. So watch for those. Watch if you're now on my email list, if you just registered, watch my social, you'll see them come out. Generally speaking, we're going to be doing them on Tuesdays. I'm sorry, today's Wednesday. And then we have a group one that I'm doing with a bunch of my friends. Beth's going to be part of that. So myself, Beth, actually William, Justin, Mike, we're going to be doing a Thursday masterclass series that's going to be fun too. The first one kicks off tomorrow. So go to my social media if you haven't registered for that one. That one's going to be great. And it's all about how you can grow with community. So thank you guys for all being here. And
fun fact, Brandon
yeah.
is amazing. Brandon hypnotized me backstage before I went on at spring break. So if anybody was there and was like, why is she so calm? It was because of Brandon Brittingham.
Fun fact about Brandon. So I was the keynote at Inside Real Estate a few weeks ago. Brandon's like, what time are you going on Spring Mall? 8:45. He's like, I'm calling you at 8. And he straight up hypnotized me too. Like get in there, get in your subconscious and whatnot. And so if you haven't, this is a fun fact about Brandon. If you're like, who is this Brandon dude? He dresses in like gold diamond chains and this Gucci stuff. And you're like, what? Who is this character? That he is legit like one of the best humans and like mic drop. You will love him. So anyway, loved having you on here, Beth.
Thank you.
Guys,
My pleasure.
register. Yeah, we'll see you next week. Bye, guys. Yeah.